followed by Senator Van Hollen and then Senator Romney.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm honored to be here on the Budget Committee with you. I just want to commit to you and my friends across the aisle is that I'm as committed as anybody is to leaving this world cleaner, healthier, and safer than we found it. That as a fifth-generation farm kid, that means that my family has been stewarding the land for 5 generations, that the soil, that our farm is in better shape today than it was 5 generations ago. That we've done things like no-till farming, like Senator Grassley mentioned, since 1991, that we planted 20,000 trees, that we have fenced off creeks, we call them cricks in Rhode Island, Chairman, but whichever it is, creeks back home, that flow into wildlife refuges. We've created wetland habitat. Precision agriculture is exploding in Kansas, that we're growing more with less, that we're reusing water, that we're taking the fat from the packing plants and turning it into renewable diesel. My point is that American innovation is working, and that's why the carbon footprint of America is 14% less today than it was a decade ago. So I think my first question is for Dr. Holtz-Eakin, and I want to say thank you for your daily DISH newsletter, which I still read daily, and appreciate your thoughts on the economy. You kind of mentioned this in your testimony. As we try to solve the problem here, which we all believe that the environment is a challenge for us right now, do you think that American innovation will have a bigger impact going forward, or do you think that a federal government heavy hand approach will have better results? And my question is the cure worse than the disease? If the federal government keeps prescribing all these expensive propositions, is the cure worse than the disease?
Well, thank you for the question and the compliments. I'm not sure the latter's deserved, but thank you. There's a real issue in having the climate strategy and the economic growth strategy work hand in hand. And one of the points I tried to make in my opening remarks is that at the moment, the federal budget is an enormous headwind to economic growth. And if we have a climate strategy that exacerbates the budget problems, it is going to make even worse the challenges on raising the standard of living for future generations. And so I worry a lot about that. I also worry about the fact that we're not guaranteed to get anything out of something like the Inflation Reduction Act because it has no sort of global coordination, and this is ultimately a global problem. And so when I think about climate, I come to the conclusion that the global challenge will not be solved without great U.S. leadership. I simply do not believe it is possible for the U.S. to be a laggard in this regard and have there be any real progress. It will not be the case that we can make great progress and provide that leadership if we are crippled by the budget outlook that we have, and if we don't undertake a strategy that features innovation. And I have for a long time been an advocate of using carbon pricing, carbon taxes in particular. Well-designed carbon taxes are huge incentives for efficiencies, innovation, that are completely decentralized. On the ground, people decide how they want to respond to price incentives. That's what made the U.S. economy the single greatest economy in the history of the world. Using the same techniques to address this problem would be exactly the right way to go. And so I think the strategy that the administration has adopted is not the best strategy. I think it will yield little, quite frankly, in climate benefits.
Okay, thank you. My next question for Dr. Carney. 2 questions. Dr. Carney, as you make your assessment of climate, you talk a lot about carbon footprints. How do you assess the cradle-to-grave impacts of what you're looking at? How do you calculate the cost of implementing your policies? And I'm going to give you a for instance. So like Iowa, Kansas, over 50% of our electricity is generated from wind. Unfortunately, wind energy is 7 times more per kilowatt to produce than from natural gas. Solar is probably 70 times per kilowatt more than from natural gas. And then when we transport that electricity, transporting electricity is 10 times more expensive than transporting natural gas. So we're exporting a lot of that wind-generated electricity, and the cost of generating it and transporting it is, you do the math, 70, 100 times more expensive. So my question, going back to you, Dr. Carney, is how do you address the entire cradle-to-grave impact of your policies, not just the carbon footprint, and how do you calculate the cost of implementing your plans?
Thank you, Chair. Just cut me off when I've used up too much time. Very quickly, I might reframe quote cradle to grave, Senator, as well to wheel. So the all-in cost delivered energy. I would point out that the levelized cost of wind and solar, new wind and solar, is now comparable, if not through, and in many jurisdictions, it is less expensive than natural gas. That's the first point. The second point, and of course subject to fewer price fluctuations in local and world markets. And then quick point, if I may, just to pick up on the fiscal point, I'll just read into the record that one of the most effective mechanisms, and the chair referenced this at the start, is credible climate policy that would include regulation. And when you combine that with the financial sector and businesses having the right information, you get the investment in technologies that are efficient today, cost effective, and in the types of innovation that will be necessary tomorrow. And I'll just refer to a detailed analysis that Secretary Yellen and I did prior to her
Well,
joining.
we'll have to agree to disagree on your cost analysis of wind and solar power. I could only wish that they were efficient.
I would
Thank you
only
so
point-
much.
I
I
would
yield
only-
back.
One of the largest investors in